Breaking Bread with the Camfather. Isky welcomes Isky Arias from Arias Pistons.
Well, thank you for having me.
Oh,
I appreciate
you're welcome.
any time with you.
I enjoy talking with you.
Oh,
Thank
thanks.
you.
Yeah.
Arias the fifth,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
I miss your grandfather.
I do
And
too.
they had a lot of good stories, and he learned a lot of little things from him. And I always figured, well, if I forget, I'll ask him the next time I have lunch. And I unexpectedly, he can't fill in my memories anymore now like he used to.
Right. Yeah, the more time passes, the more questions I have.
All right.
And but I'm lucky to have my dad, and my dad was around that stuff for such a long time, so it means a lot to me to hear all the stories and learn a lot from all you guys.
Okay.
I know that you guys were good friends.
Yeah, we learned from the older guys. That's in this business, yeah. And we started out with hot rods in about 1933. That's when I saw my first gow job. Get up and go, and that became gow. So they call them gow jobs and later hot rods.
That is so cool.
And there was very little money involved. You could buy a Model T for $10. And a little roadster been sitting in somebody's backyard for about a year, and it's got 4 front tires, and you could buy it for $10. And when you saved up your money, you drug that home. And luckily, that couple of fellas, Eugene Van Arks and Bob Bowen, who belonged to the Bungholders Club, the president was Bud Hines. And they lived in our neighborhood, and we could go over there and ask questions and watch them work on their cars. And boy, it was exciting. What could be more fun than this? What are they? Well, we just go, they're street cars that have been strapped down and made into a sort of a racing car, homemade racing car. And we'd go on trips sometimes to the mountains or the beach and stay overnight. Bring blankets and forth. And then we discovered there's a place to race the car for top speed. Muroc Dry Lake, 20 miles long, flat as a pancake. Wonderful. And if you go up there, you'll see 100 gow jobs. Hot rods.
Wow.
I couldn't believe it. It's really true. There is 100 cars up there. But one by one, they're making time trials for top speed. Not many cars can do 90 or 100 miles an hour. And we had our heroes. Those were the guys that knew how to make them go fast. The older guys, they're 5 years older than us. And they're teaching us what they know. That's what the sport was. It didn't cost hardly anything, and what fun it was.
What year was your first time out there?
I was probably 12 years old in 1933, and I got my first ride up to Muroc Dry Lake. Yeah. And so surprised when we saw all these cars which come from different parts of California. Cars we never get to see, and we learn by looking at what they built. So pretty soon we're getting ideas. We want to build a car. We want to hop up our Model T, stock Model T. And we've heard about the speed equipment that was available. And there was so much to learn and so many good teachers out there, right direct from the older guys' mouths, So
Is there one person who you credit to be your main mentor? Is there one person that taught you the most?
Later on, I found out one of the smartest and the most intelligent man about racing engines, whether you convert a passenger car engine into a racing engine or build a racing engine, was Ed Winfield, who was born in 1901. So he was born in horse and buggy days in Los Angeles. There weren't any cars on the road yet. But when he was 6 years old, he told me he wrote a penny postcard to the magazine when he saw an ad on the new cars that were coming out, many new cars. And he'd get the brochure on the car, and he was studying almost all the new cars that were coming out. And of course, later on, he was racing on Model T on the racetracks and winning a lot of races, racing against some professional racing engines and other hopped up V8 Model T engines. And we were lucky to have him right here in Glendale, nearby.
So he was producing camshafts and cylinder heads for.
Yeah, that was his
flathead
specialty. And the first camshafts he made were for his motorcycle, which
really?
had one or two lobes, and he'd grind those by hand. And later on, he built a cam grinder.
That's awesome.
And so forth.
That's awesome.
And he was the expert even at Indianapolis. He had made carburetors and other things too, and was associated with Indianapolis racers.
And you had purchased your first cam grinder from Ed, is that correct?
Yeah, about before the war, probably about 1938 or 9. I was building a hot rod that was, it was an F head for a Chevy, F head for a 32 Ford V8 engine, and I knew that would be. I couldn't use a regular cam, and I knew I had to go to him. And I was fascinated when he showed me his cam grinder he had built, and I couldn't believe it. So that's the way it's done, because I had no idea was how to make a camshaft. So he was kind of a world expert at the time, and he told me a lot of the tricks he does with the cam grinder, and I was fascinated. And he knew that eventually I would try to grind cams. I didn't know it, but he knew. He seemed to know.
Is that for the flathead that's in your Roadster? Is what you?
Yeah, when I was buying a cam for the Roadster with those backseat overhead valve heads, they were F heads, half flathead, half overhead. Even a Rolls Royce, Rolls Royce even had an F head engine for quite a while.
Wow.
In the old days, yeah.
So does that get the exhaust out of the block?
Yeah. Usually the exhaust is in the block, and the intake is overhead.
Okay. Oh, okay. I see.
For better breathing. And that fourth cycle engine, it was amazing. When they made the first fourth cycle engine, they were tickled to death to hear it run. And they made a little power. And when it came to valve timing, it was very simple. You open it top dead center and close it bottom center. Intake was opening at top center, close at bottom center. Compression, bottom center to top center on the piston, Then power stroke, then exhaust stroke. 4 strokes. So how are you going to make more power out of that engine? Well, the secret is more air. If you can get more air in the engine, you can breathe more gasoline. You can't use more gasoline unless you have the air to go with it. The trick for the cam grinder, or anybody who wants to hop up an engine, is to lengthen that exhaust stroke. And how do you lengthen the exhaust stroke when it only opens at top center, closes at bottom center to draw in the extra air? The trick is to lengthen the intake stroke to get more air, and you encroach on the other strokes. Like the exhaust stroke terminates just before the intake stroke. So you, believe it or not, because there's dwell, pistons dwell at top center and at bottom center, which means that a lot of degrees pass by, but the piston doesn't move very much. The dwell at top center and bottom center. So we encroach on that, the dwell, to lengthen the intake stroke, and the power goes up, evidently. And that's the secret, get more intake in. This is on a normally aspirated engine without a supercharger.
So the experimenting in your early days of camshaft grinding and performing the experiments that you just explained, what was your main platform at the time? Was it inlines over flathead V8s, or were you partial to the? I'm sure you were partial to
a lot of the scout job racers, Dry Lake racers, went into the service when the war started. So and they learned a lot more, working on government equipment and so forth. Sometimes even supercharged engines. And when the war was over, they come back and they always wanted to go to Bonneville, or not Bonneville, but Dry Lakes, and go faster with what they had learned during the war. So that's when I decided maybe I ought to try grinding cams from what Winfield taught me. And I bought an old cylindrical grinder in an auction for about $700, and made the cam grinding attachment on it with what I had learned in the machine shop. Because you could get it, when the war started here, it was hard to get a job in a machine shop in order to learn. But once the war started, we had to make airplanes and parts for England, and you could get a job in the machine shop now as an apprentice. So that was a big help.
How long after the experimenting did you finally come up with your own grind that was offered to the market?
Right. Well,
what was your biggest?
Well, I had to see what the people in the cam grinding business had, so forth. So I plotted out the cam. Every degree of rotation had a certain amount of lift, and I would graph this. What looked like a hump was the intake stroke, and how we're going to get more power out of the engine. As we lengthen the intake event, the power goes down at low speed and goes up at high speed. Let's say you have a dynamometer. So you start with the stock cam and get the amount of horsepower, and you got that all recorded. And now you make the cam 10 degrees longer, we'll say, on the intake and the exhaust. And by golly, the power went up at higher speeds and a little less at low speed. And then you put another 10 degrees on. Power goes up at high speeds and a little less at low speed. And then finally, you lose the low speed and the top speed. So this cam won't work in the engine. It's too much, too long. There's only one way to get that cam into the engine. That's to advance it. Advance the intake. Start opening during the dwell time at top dead center, which doesn't hurt much, and you close just before there's puff back. What is puff back? If the intake valve closes a little bit too late because the piston's coming up now instead of down and drawing in, you're working against incoming air. You're going to puff back what part of what you took in. You're going to waste that. So that's when you have to advance the intake. That's the only way you can get that long cam in the engine, by advancing it, and that's changing the lobe centers. That's something they are talking about now, lobe centers. Well, stock lobe centers are somewhere between 120 degrees between the intake and the exhaust, or as little as 110 sometimes. So by advancing the intake, which is changing the lobe centers, you can tolerate more cam in the engine. So a cam with very close lobe centers, like 105 degrees, maybe 100 degrees in an extreme example, would be for very top-end, high-end horsepower, giving away the low-speed performance, of course, to get the top-speed performance.
Does that relate to cylinder pressure and
yes,
it bleeding off?
Yeah, cylinder pressure. Well, cylinder pressure when the engine's ready to fire. Yes, that's what you want. The maximum amount of pressure there. And by the way, high compression gives you more power than low compression. Low compression is that's one way to increase horsepower, is to raise compression. Of course, it takes higher octane fuel to prevent detonation and pre-ignition and things like that. Those are other factors you have to take into consideration.
Sure. Yeah. And on the if you were to build your typical, let's say, a small block Chevy street engine, and you have a pretty decent cam with decent duration, let's say on 109, let's say.
Uh-huh.
If you want to increase the torque a little bit just for running around town, doesn't it increase some of the low-end torque if you advance the camshaft?
Yeah, you could advance the whole camshaft, which means intake and exhaust.
So you just move them
both
together.
Both are advanced.
Right.
Yeah.
And does that bleed off less cylinder pressure and low RPM range? Is that right?
Yeah, the closing point on the intake is a critical point, and it relates to the RPM you're running the engine at, So the higher the engine speed, the later you can close the intake, and of course you're giving away some low-end power to gain the top-end power, which you don't mind doing. But finally there's a point where it just can't stand to be closed any later, otherwise you're going to get puff back. Draw in a lot, puff back, and so...
Isn't that sort of what occurs with a high duration camshaft at idle?
That's
it's just reversion, and that's what makes it sound so
and
good.
of course at idle closing way too late for idle.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it sounds good.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Some people like that. Yeah.
So what was your first most successful flathead V8 camshaft in racing was
Well, I think we called it the 1007. And we didn't know if we had anything or not. We look in the book, we see cam timing on an early engine, maybe built in the 1930s. And we noticed there's a clearance ramp where maybe 20 or 30 degrees, it's opening the valve only a half a thousand for every degree of camshaft rotation. I said, well, if I'm gonna make a cam, something new, that'll take a rotary table and a milling machine, and I'll make the cam 1 degree at a time. Well, we're not set up yet for that, but I knew I could see the camshaft was a series of radiuses. So I'm going to leave off the clearance ramp on this first cam, and I'm going to have a base circle, which is just a round base circle, and I'm going to sweep a 4-inch radius off the adjacent to the base and go up to what I thought would be the highest lift, but I was afraid to go over 5/16 lift at the time. And then the closing ramp would be the same radius, and then you blend the two together with a little nose radius. And that's all it was. And boy, I didn't realize that it was very noisy, but I found that out later. Well, I made my first cam, and it looked good. And I had it plotted out on paper, what mine looks like and what other people's look like. And I could see that I'm opening faster than anyone else. And so I've got more breathing area under the lip curve during the intake stroke. And I decided, well, this is the only kind of cam I have. And a young fella building his first Ford V8 flathead comes to me for advice, and he's willing to buy a cam. And I'm going to sell him this cam, which I didn't even know how it would run like. And by God, he got it running, and he when he drove it in his roadster, I could hear it coming from a half a block away, the tappet noise. Wow, I was a little ashamed of that. But maybe I'll go to those tappet radius. Maybe I'll go to the clearance ramps later to take up the slack, take up the lash slowly so it won't make all that noise.
You're watching Breaking Bread with the Camfather. Now, back to Ed Iskandarian and Justin Arias.
When the guy's name was Barsky, you said, who?
Yeah, Bob Barsky had the money to put on that first hot rod show, and the cheapest place to do it was downtown at Exposition Park, where the National Guard has a building. So they emptied the GI trucks out of the building. This is after the war, 1949. And now they could rent out booth space to feed shops and good-looking hot rods they'd bring in to display them. And guess what? Race drivers like Rex Mays and some of those others came to see what are the hot rod kids doing, because they were hot rod kids too to begin with. but now they're even raising it in Indianapolis. So Barsky, here's a rumor that the kids that work for him, Peterson and Lindsay, are starting a hot rod magazine. So he makes believe that since they work for him, whatever they came up with, he owns also. So he calls them in and says, boys, I understand we have a magazine coming out called Hot Rod Magazine. And they're surprised. They thought they're going to have to share it with him. But no, it's all theirs, and he doesn't want to put any money into it. So by golly, that magazine came out in 1949, right after the show. And I missed the first issue because I didn't know it was coming out. Reggie Slemmer had his 130 mile an hour, 140 mile an hour dry lace racer on that front cover. But I got into the second issue. And what could I say? Iskandarian racing cams. Winners use Isky racing cams. And I had no winners at all. And that magazine got back east to NASCAR, which had just started up. And these circle track racers, what they called on the telephone, my first telephone call. My address was in that ad. And the guys were new at the NASCAR racing, not very well known, not much experience, and they bought 2 cams by air mail. Oh, I was excited. Air mail, wow. And they didn't want to know what experience I had or anything. Because most of the guys that are building stuff want to know if you know anything.
Sure.
So, by golly, they must have made a pretty good showing at the racetrack, and they went a lot faster than they used to go. And people paid attention and said, well, what did they do to go faster? Like, they used to be tail end Charlies. But now they're coming up a little bit. So, by golly, they got my phone number and they've started buying. The smarter guys, the guys with more experience, and pretty soon I was dominating, believe it or not, on the flathead Ford in NASCAR racing. Yeah, awesome. I couldn't believe it. Awesome. And I was on that phone day after day, hour after hour, you know. They wanted to speak directly with me. In those days, they wanted to speak directly with me. They still do, I guess.
Yeah, of course.
My ambition was to make $100 a day labor on grinding the cam. That would be 5 cams I'd have to do a day. And it took about a year, and I was doing 100 a day. But at first it was a little struggle, and I'd do all kinds of cams, Model A Fords and various Chevys, anything that came along. So,
when you did the cam shaft for Kenny Bigelow, the one that you made for him was a profile that you named the Bigelow, is that correct?
Yeah, so I put his name on it. After all, how many cams have I got? 2 or 3? So what are we going to call it? We call it the Bigelow because we made it for Bigelow. Yeah, and that was a good way of keeping track. Wow. Kenny Bigelow.
So it was only a profile for a 6-cylinder then?
Yeah, that's all. Yeah. But it was, by golly, it was good for Chevy V8s when they come out later. I didn't know that, but it's going to work okay there too.
Yeah, I remember hearing that.
And pretty soon Bigelow, since he was hanging around, I put him to work. He had good ideas, and he knew the theories. He knew the theory pretty good too. Yeah.
So with Kenny, my grandpa Nick raced a 37 Chevy with Kenny that had a Jimmy 6 with a Nash Twin 6 ignition, and I think it had 3 carburetors on it, and they ran it at the lakes, and he told me that he crashed El Mirage and he passed away from the wreck in 1951.
Yeah, that was a shame. These safety rules usually come about by someone getting badly hurt or killed sometimes. So we have some cars are really safe to drive now at these high speeds. I think it's hard to believe.
So that the first shop that you were working at, that was in Culver City?
Yeah, now John had a little machine shop in Culver City. And had a dirt floor.
Awesome.
An illegal little building they'd put up. And so when I bought, this would need a 3-phase 220 power. So the grinder was there, and my little lathe was in the alley, in the garage, in the alley. And so part of the work was done at home in the garage, and part of it was done behind his shop in Culver City.
Well, at that time, when did you meet my grandpa Nick?
Oh, Nick. Well, we knew Nick because Nick was everywhere, learning. He was, we called him the spy, because anyone that was going fast, he was checking them out and see what he had and what it looked like, what the engine looked like, and he was learning, and he found out a lot. So, Nick the spy.
Awesome.
Yeah. So he was there in the beginning, because he was friends with Carmen Paisano and that bunch on Vermont Avenue.
Yes, he was. And he worked with Bob Toros at Wayne at that time.
Oh yeah, you know that Wayne was a smart man, and evidently he didn't know that a GMC was a better engine than a Chevy engine, so he built his first overhead cam with his own design head on a Chevrolet instead of the Jimmy. Oh, so later on he learned he didn't know what Bigelow knew. They were built by the thousands during the war, those GMCs. We didn't pay attention. For some reason we were still hooked on a flathead Ford. But that GMC had a lot of potential, yeah.
Pitch was that they can get 100 horsepower per cube, or excuse me, 1 horsepower per cube.
Yeah.
Out of a Jimmy.
Oh yeah,
with their
when we heard that about how much horsepower per cubic inch, we thought, boy, that would be something if we get 1 horsepower cubic inch. And pretty soon they did that, and then even more later, little by little. But even Wayne didn't know that Jimmy, he should have started with that instead of using the Chevy 6, because the Chevy 6 had a real funny combustion chamber. Now this brings up something interesting. Frank McGurk specialized in hopping up Chevrolet engines.
Yeah.
In the old days, he used to run with Brady. They would go to hot rod races before the war. These are street roadsters running on the racetrack. And then later, Indianapolis, he went. Well, he started to specialize in Chevrolet 6. And one day he called me. He says, you know, they're coming out with a Chevy V8. You're kidding. Yep, they are. I'm trying to get an engine early before they come out in their car. I can't get it. But I'm getting some parts. What parts did you get? We got the rocker arm. It's got a funny rocker arm. It doesn't have a rocker arm shaft. It doesn't. Oh, it's got to have a rocker arm shaft. No, it don't have a rocker arm shaft. What does it look like? Well, there's a stud
Oh, that's right.
and half a ball and something that looked like a rowboat. A rowboat. The guy around looks like a rowboat. Hold the fool, I'm coming over there. I gotta see this. And there it was, the ball-stud rocker. And then Frank says, you know, I'm going back east. It's the year the Chevrolet's coming up. I'm buying one of those Chevy V8s. And we're going to pick it up in Lansing, Michigan. Then I'm going to the race. How'd you like to come along? Oh, I'd love it. And by golly, we went to General Motors building downtown Detroit. And we meet. So we're talking together, and then these cars, and he's telling us these cars are really fast, you know, these Chevy V8s. How do you know they're fast? They're not out yet. Oh, we had the engine in there, last year's model, 6-cylinder, we put the engine in there, that year's 6-year model. Nothing could take it from a signal in Detroit. We raced everything. We can't. Nothing can take that Chevy V8. Really. So McGurk picks up his Chevy, brand new, and we go to Indianapolis and we meet a lot of the racers and everything. They're all friends of his. That was the first race after the war.
So when my grandfather was starting the piston shop, he started at Anson, working for Louis Center up here on Western, I believe it was.
That's
Is that
right, yeah.
Like 137th and Western, I think it was. I mean, I wasn't there, but that's what I heard. And then they moved the piston shop to Normandy. So were you guys close friends at that time already when he moved the shop?
We'd always meet together, and your grandfather had a lot of ideas, you know, good ideas and stuff. He'd want to know the latest, best of everything.
The spy. As a matter of fact, we were talking about Rudy Muller earlier.
And Rudy Muller, oh yeah.
Well, he came out with the Hemi cylinder head for the Chevrolet. My grandfather did in '72, and Rudy had helped with the designing of that cylinder head.
That's right.
And that's the head that had 3 push rods per cylinder.
Oh, did it?
Yeah. It had a crossover push rod from the intake shaft to the exhaust.
Oh, I didn't know
to keep
the
exhaust rocker from laying down real low.
By God, I didn't know that. I know one thing he did in later years. He took the air-cooled Boxer 6 Chevy engine, the what do they call that?
The Corvair.
Corvair, and he hung it on the back. It was kind of like a big outboard, and then it went to a prop, air-cooled. I think it was air-cooled. Yeah, it stayed air-cooled, and he actually built that. That was amazing, that project he meant.
Oh, that's awesome.
He had a lot of good ideas. Wayne Horney. And he was a good friend of Winfield's. I think he got good advice from Winfield too.
Yeah, he worked with
who was his friend?
Harry Warner.
Warner, yeah. That's right. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, so throughout the 50s, the 331 Chrysler came onto the market in what, 1952?
Yeah, 51, I think, but I'm not sure.
So I'm sure that was probably a big seller in camshafts for you as they evolved into the bigger
Yeah, little by
like
little, that Chrysler became very popular, and
it seemed to be the dominant engine in drag racing even as of the mid-50s or late 50s, I would say, right?
Yeah.
And you were developing other parts for those too, right? Like blower drives and...
Oh, yes, that's right, yeah.
Tensioners and stuff like that?
Yeah, let's see, what happened? The GMC drove... Oh, yeah. A government bid came out where they had a 1,500 brand new GMC 6-cylinder blowers in stock.
Awesome.
they've been sitting there about 10 years or more. It seems that whenever the government has war equipment, they have to have spare parts for everything. You can't hold up a war machine because we don't have enough spare parts for the vehicles and stuff. So when government orders the vehicles, they have to have so many spare parts in stock, ready to ship where needed right away. So here they are. They've been sitting there brand new in the box, and everybody had already found out about the Jimmy. Said the block, that's too big, that 6-cylinder. 4-cylinder would be about right. That's what they thought. So I went to Vic Edelbrock and said, look at here, here's a government bid on these blowers. 1,500 available. And I want you to bid on them, Vic. And you make the manifolds that'll fit on all these different engines, Chrysler included. And so he thought it over and he said, well, I'll make the manifold for you, but you buy the blowers, you bid on the blowers. Oh my goodness. This is going to take a lot of dough. I'm going to bid $7 a piece, and that'll come to about $8,000, $10,000. Wow. Will I ever be able to sell them? Wow. Well, that's not realistic. So I'm going to go, I'll go to $7 on all of them. But I'll also go, on 10 only, I'll go $30 a piece. As the bid opens, somebody wanted one. He come first, $200 he paid. Another guy's paid $100 and so on. And finally I got my 10, and the Chicago surplus dealers, they got over 1,000.
Jeez.
Pretty soon we sold those right away for $75 a piece, even though they were too big. Everyone thought they were too big. It's developed between a flathead and his Chevrolet 6. They would laugh, but after they got beat, they realized he had some. Well, Bigelow was there. Bigelow knew about the Jimmy 6, GMC 270 Jimmy. So he comes to me, I want a cam just like you made for Carmen Paisano, but I want to go with my Jimmy. It fits right in the engine, in the car, in the Chevrolet, and I'm moving the radiator up 1 inch, and that gives me the room for the little longer engine. And he's going to hop up a Chevrolet 6. Oh my goodness, I said, boy, you're going to get in trouble. I understand that intake valve is very close to the piston. If we put a cam in there, it won't turn over, the valve will hit the piston. Don't worry, I'm taking care of all that. What are you going to do? I'm heating the head red hot at Arco Welding. I'm changing the combustion chamber altogether and filling it in with weld and so forth. And so, okay, he was gung-ho and not afraid to tie anything. So, okay, it'll be $20 for the cam. So I grind him what I think it'd be a good cam for that flathead, for that Chevrolet 6. By the way, he didn't know that a GMC would fit right in to the transmission bolts, and you could get it as big as 270 cubic inches. That he found out, that Bigelow found that out. So by golly, he got that running, and it sounded great. Yeah. And
so each cylinder was 71 cubic inches then?
Yeah,
okay.
Each cylinder was 71 inches, yeah.
I read that in that.
You're watching Breaking Bread with the Camfather. Now, back to Isky.
Well, Don Garlitz is back east, and I'm putting up big in my ads, and I'm thinking I'm getting the good out of this advertising him. I'm exploiting him. And I was, but I didn't know it. He was exploiting me too. Every weekend he had appearance money to go here or there from that ad in my ad.
All right.
I didn't realize it was doing him good. I thought I was only doing myself good. It gives you an idea. And it doesn't cost money to get publicity. You don't have to spend a lot of money if you know where to put your money.
Didn't you sell Garlitz his first blower drive?
Yeah.
When he put a blower on it after he got his ass kicked?
So pretty soon, now, since we were trying to get a bargain on all those blowers, and
initially, didn't he have carburetors on top of the blower?
yeah, it began, and it went just as good that way as it with blowers. But anyway,
Awesome.
so Garlitz is back east. He's really interested in an Oldsmobile engine. And he goes to the wrecking yard to buy it. It's sold already. You're too late. And the guy says, hey, I've got a Chrysler here, 51 Chrysler here. It looks like a good racing engine. So he's forced to buy that. Well, since Ernie Hashem is already running one of those, he buys it. And he doesn't know he can get a pre-cam from me. So he buys one from me, just like Ernie Hashem has. It's like I fixed for him. And pretty soon he's doing pretty good.
Over the years, at that time, Chris Karamessinis was probably coming onto the scene. And I think he was from Chicago, is that right?
That's right, yeah, that's right.
And he had a
Him
shop.
and his great mechanic, Maynard. He was from Tucson, Arizona, where the Street Sport Roasters originated.
Oh, yeah, Red Dress.
Yeah. And you know they had the right idea, that motor in the beer. Of course, we had the Sidewinder, but that was too much trouble with that chain drive. All that roadster was needed to put the wheels out in front. That's all it needed. Because that's what
that was a trick setup. I believe they used Stromberg 97s and converted Strombergs into a throttle body. And they ran it, I think, on 100% nitro, I believe, back in the 50s.
Well, since Edelbrock uses a V860 with a Stromberg carburetor, he to convert for nitro, he had a kit. You got big dump tubes and much richer for alcohol. So that if you buy that kit and convert to nitro, by God, it handled it pretty good.
So what was your relationship with Karamessinis and him going 200 miles an hour?
Oh yeah, well, some people doubt that. Maybe it might be true, might not. But anyway, we would give him. He would try different cams for us and everything.
What was your hottest nitro cam in the 60s? Was that the 5-cycle? Is that what that would have been?
Yeah, we put that name on it, but
or the Super Ligera?
originally we called it a 270 or something like that. But anyway, but one time it was funny. One time up in the San Francisco Bay Area, this guy that runs tractors up there and had a street shop. His name was, gosh, I can't. And he calls up and wants to run for us, so all he'll get is free cams. That's all he gets. And so Ted Fry runs at Bonneville and he works for me. I says, I want you to go up there and take these 2 cams. If you trust him, give him this latest cam like here Mercedes is using. And if you don't quite trust him, give him this older cam. So he calls up. Boy, he says, this guy is like gold. He says, he's already got your name painted all over his car. Really? Okay, and that turned out to be a great relationship. And I'll think of his name as we go along. So he says, he'd try various cams for us. And then we decided to give him the latest cam, is the one Karen Massini's like. It was a high RPM cam and soft action, and we sent it to him. And he sent it back to us. Oh, you give me junk. He said he had done something wrong and it didn't run right. So we put that cam aside. Karen Massini's like that cam. So we give him his old cam that he liked. And he'd break a cam now and then. So by golly, he's broken his cam, and we can't get him another cam. We have to ship it by Greyhound for a big race going on, important race.
Greyhound.
The only cam we got is the one he don't like. So we round the name off the back and put a funny number on it and sent it to him. And we held our breath. This is a no good cam, according to his last test. And he called up and says, "You dirty guys. You dirty guys. Didn't run too good? Are you kidding? We took everything. We bought everything. We top eliminator, top side, everything. You've been holding out on us, giving Cameron Seedings the good stuff, and we get the old stuff." And so you like the cat? Oh, yeah, you've been holding out on us. I'll be darned. It was Ted Gotelli. Terrible Ted Gotelli. Oh, boy, he was good. When this little speed shop with Louis Center and Jack Andrews on Jefferson Avenue, they Ed Pink works at the show. He's an usher there. How do you get that? I always wanted to get that job, being an usher at the show, but they never would hire me. But anyway, they had to be good looking. So Ed Pink is have a flat engine being built up, and he said they called me aside, him and his friend. They're building this car, and Louis Tanner doing work. You know, we heard that if you our pistons, if we got a 1/8 stroke, it's supposed to say on our pistons 1/16 LC. I said, yeah. They moved the wrist pin a 1/16 of an inch so the piston won't hit the head. So you get an extra stroke, you got a 1/16 above and a 1/16 below. Yeah, ours don't say anything, but Louis Tanner charged us $100 for a stroke. And we don't know if we really got one or not. Years go by. Finally, he's paying a time payment on this engine Louis built for him. Finally, I says, whatever happened about that 1/8 stroke? He says, well, we had the bill paid down to $100. That's all we owed. And I told Louis, why don't we just call it even for that stroke I didn't get? And Louis says, okay.
Ted Gotelli always had good drivers.
Oh, yeah, he did.
He had Denny Milani, who passed away.
Yeah.
Kenny Safford.
Oh, yeah.
That's my favorite front engine dragster of all time. Is the candy apple red front engine dragster that Denny Milani drove in 1965.
And
it was owned by Gotelli.
Gotelli, yeah.
But Denny drove it.
It
was Pete Ogden chassis, Bob Stroll body.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Did you sell a lot of parts to Gotelli Speed Shop? Did they sell a lot of your stuff there?
He's done pretty well. Yeah. Yeah. And then his competitor was in San Francisco. I forget the name of their place now.
Champion?
Huh?
Champion Speed?
What?
Was it
Champion?
Speed?
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah,
Jim McLennan.
yeah, that's right. And you know, in the early days, here's what happened. They sold another combiner by the name of Weber. Weber made flywheels and clutches and stuff like that, and cams too. And his big dealer was those guys in San Francisco.
Yeah, they used to make like aluminum flywheels.
And all that
for-
kind of stuff,
Yeah.
yeah. So,
That's awesome.
they were interested in selling my cams too, and but they didn't put them in their ad or something. It was a conflict between Weber and me. I think I put in the ad, and it offended Weber. Thought they were captive from him, you know. So anyway, we'll just they'll stop using my cam and stay with Weber or something. I forget, something come up. I forget.
With Vitelli.
Yes, no, with Champion Speed.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
so they did good business.
You're watching Breaking Bread with the Camfather. Now, back to Ed Iskandarian and Justin Arias.
I wanted to ask you a little bit about just the later years and your relationship getting closer with my grandfather, Nick.
Yeah.
I know that you guys would come here all the time, and he would meet you here for lunch, always.
Yeah. Well, the story I love is when he took that V8 drag racing motor, all aluminum, and it had gone bad on the front cylinders or something, and he cut them off and made it into a V6.
Yep.
And by God, why not run that in sprint car?
Yeah.
Well, we had heard in motorcycles or cars, but I first heard about it in motorcycles. If you have a uneven firing motor, it's good on the racetrack sometimes, on dirt tracks especially. And like Honda had trouble competing with their four-cylinder engine, inch per inch, trying to stay with a push-rod Harley, a V-twin, uneven firing. You know, if you took out the spark plugs and put it in high gear in your car and pushed it, and every time a cylinder fired, you put a chalk mark on the tire. And then you tire, and if it's uneven firing, they're unevenly spaced. And there's something good about that on a dirt track. It gets a bite and a rest or something. I don't know, we don't know exactly what it is.
It's amazing.
So by golly, when he built that engine, put it in a sprint car, had a little trouble at first, but later on, now he might have had 6 or so cubic inches more than the Chevy was allowed, like a 300 inch or something, maybe had. But by God, that driver won the race. 3 days, 3 years, 3 races in a row, they say. And at first I heard that the driver didn't even know he was going fast. I don't know. Then I said, no, he knows he's going fast. He's going to get a high road way up high. There was something good about that uneven firing. So they banned him. But I could see where that could have upset the Chevrolet dominant engine deal.
Yeah. That sprint car, I believe, was owned by Smokey Alleman.
Oh, was it?
I think so.
I know there was an owner of that car, and I don't think it was the latest, hottest chassis or anything, but
Yeah.
Almond.
Yeah.
Oh, almond.
Yeah, Smokey.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Here's the amazing thing about two-cycle engines. In outboard racing with two-cycle engines, there was a famous engine builder in Europe that his name was, oh, shucks, have I forgot it? Koenig. Koenig was his name. And he built two-cycle engines for other racers that raced two-cycle boats. Irregular class deal.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes he would beat the other guys that he sold engines to, and I said, well, you got a better engine. The engine in your car isn't the same as ours. Oh, yes, it is. I'll trade you any time. So he would offer to trade any time. So then they heard these races would take in beautiful cities. They'd have the race downtown with the river right there, right in front of all the businesses and everything. And got to be too much noise, and they put on mufflers. Gotta have mufflers. And they did, and the two-cycle engine picked up power and went better. Holy smoke. And that caused the development of the expansion chamber and that little exhaust.
Yeah.
Everything has to be just right. That little tiny exhaust has to be just right. Everything. And now the engine comes to life at high RPM and supercharges itself. This exhaust has got fuel and air in it, and it pumps back and supercharges the two-cycle engine. And the motorcycles, when they got this on there, they get up to a certain RPM and it says, oh, I'm on the pipe now. Now it's stronger than ever. All that kind of stuff. So I'm wondering someday if we'll do that with a four-cycle engine, the exhaust will go out, but maybe it's all gone in just 10, 50 degrees or 10, and the rest of the power exhaust stroke is unnecessary. And what if that exhaust pipe on a four-cycle engine was a certain size and a certain length, or maybe even have an expansion chamber and then a little outlet, that we'd get an extra power stroke. Instead of one power stroke every 2 revolutions, 2, and the extra power stroke would be a suction stroke. The exhaust going out would suck the piston up and make a slight bit of power. Wouldn't that be something? If someone developed that,
I've never even thought about that before.
that
I got
could
off
be,
the camera.
it might
Thank
be
you.
done.
No, I got to take a picture. I
But
did a
somebody's
video.
going to cost a lot of money to find
I
out.
can't get where the.
This will go with my.
Okay, so let's wrap
Well,
it up.
Ed, I think we're running out of film here,
Okay.
so we might have to come to a.
I got it. Don't
Thanks,
worry.
Norma.
I got it.
All right.
Thank you very much for having me.
You bet. It was a lot of fun to think about those old days. Yes. Sometimes we had some lucky breaks. Sometimes we get and some funny things happen.
Well, it's
Oh yeah, I got to tell you about Chuck Potman. He was a cab grinder, and a lot of fun to talk to. And one day he called me. Oh yeah. When we first started to supercharge these engines, we damaged the blower if we popped back on us and wrecked the blower. So he said, "Let me fix them up for racing for you." So he did. He turned the OD down, I think 10 thousandths on its side, loosened it up, so it didn't pump as good. But it would pump. You could backfire it; it wouldn't hurt it too much. So we used to send brand new blowers to him, and he would wreck them by doing that. So later on, we learned the guys wanted them tighter, not looser. So Potvin said one day, he tells me, "Oh, what was the content. I had a funny story to go to the pop. Yeah.
He's the one who engineered the front drive of a 671 on a
Yeah, there's a controversy about it. Who did it first, Ernie Hashem or Potvin? One of them.
And I heard they
were
weren't.
pretty close.
I heard they weren't as effective as a top mount because you can't overdrive them. I think they just ran 1-to-1.
That was one thing, and then fuel distribution. When it comes down that tube, and you have to distribute to 8 cylinders, you might
right.
take certain amount of baffling, and who knows what you'd have to do to get that equal to all cylinders. That was the problem.
I think they're going to kick us off the stage here, Ed, so we should probably take our conversation offline.
Sure enjoys it. Well, you've got a lot of knowledge you picked up over the years. I'll say you've been following this close, and even our photographer knows something too.
Yeah, Gatelli.
Gatelli.
Well, I've had
What, did you live in San Francisco?
No, I've just been in drag racing a long time.
You did?
No, just a fan.
But he was a super fan. No word.
Yeah.
Yeah, because Gatelli was good, yeah.
Well, thank you, Ed.
Okay, thank you, Jesse.
Appreciate it.
Now, your brother's name is
Steven.
Stephen,
Yeah.
and you're the fifth. You're the fifth.
Pretty much, yeah.
Your mother is just, what's your mother's name? Jessie? No.
Cindy.
Cindy. Oh, yeah, Cindy. And your grandmother, your aunt's name is?
Carmen.
Carmen and?
Well, okay, so my mom has 2 sisters named Debbie and Steph.
Debbie and?
Stephanie.
Stephanie.
But
which one comes to the drags? Both of them?
Yeah, they do.
They're all of them.
Yeah. It's a family affair.
Stephanie and?
Debbie.
Debbie, Stephanie, and?
Cindy.
Cindy. Well, it's going to take a while. I got to write it down.
Oh, it's
Okay.
all good.
Okay.
Thank you,
All right,
Ed.
thank you very
Thank you.
much.
Appreciate it.
Wonderful.
For breaking
Boy,
bread.
you got a good hand there.
Oh, thanks. My dad taught
You've
me.
been listening to cylinder heads on and off.
Yeah, a few.
That's a good
Okay.
You won't do it.